Book.
Oh, we're live? I'm sorry. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Magic Box. I am Tristan Sean Gregson here with Kyle Eck. You can tell we're dedicated because the playoffs have started, and I have chose to be here rather than watch the myriad of important games that are happening moments from now.
It's true. I feel like, just don't tell anyone in Canada about this stream, because they might get a little conflicted.
I wish there was conflict. There's no conflict. It's very easy to make the choice. I will probably be watching the games at some point while we're sitting here. I'm not going to lie.
Good to know that you're fully focused on this endeavor.
I spent a lot of time with this today. Put together the show notes, came up with a myriad of not only topics but cards to go over.
Spent a lot of time in hair and makeup, clearly.
I was driving around a lot today with the sunroof down because it's so effing nice out, and that ended up in this sweet head debacle we've got going on. But the people listening to this after the fact don't know that.
Yeah.
Spam
Trash wants to get right into the topic.
Well, he knows what's going on. I mean, the room opens up, people are in the room, bam, we have suggestions. All well and good. We will get to that. Today's main topic is we're talking about fringe cards, pet cards, questionable cards. As we're coming up on the Dragon's Maze cube change, obviously the first thing people will ask is, well, why bother playing X, Y, Z? Why all these cards? And you kind of have to defend them a little too much, in my opinion. I think that the internets as a whole, we've actually done a pretty good job of saying, like, here's a Fire Diamond and why, here's a Covetous Dragon and why. But there's still a pretty long laundry list of cards that it's like, maybe we run it, maybe we don't run it, maybe there's a weird reason we do run it. I
also want to talk today a little bit, provided we have time, of course, about the Magic Online Cube that obviously launched today. I'm going to be doing a lot of streaming of that. I know I haven't yet. I know, tell by my fancy shirt, I had a job interview this morning, so didn't have the free time. But going forward, I want to talk a little bit about just kind of a general overview of the list. If you're going to draft it, what you should look for and what not to look for. Kind of things that make sense, things that don't make sense, strategies to avoid, strategies to capitalize on.
There's like so many lands now.
I know. It's insane.
So many lands.
Vin would be so stoked.
Yeah, 5-color things all the time.
So, we got a lot to get into, so let's get into the favorite thing for everybody, which is our packs.
Pick one. Pack one.
Alright, first up.
It's so small.
It's kind of tiny.
It's so small.
There we go. That's fine. Okay. This pack, we've got a Loxodon Smiter, Blade Splicer, Is It Charm, Smother, Hero of Oxid Ridge, Pack Rat, Library of Alexandria, Karn Liberated, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Banefire, Mana Vault, Woodfall Primus, Bribery, Vindicate, Lightning Bolt.
It's a good one.
This is possibly the best, highest power level pack we've ever looked at on this show.
I think that's pretty clearly, yeah. Thankfully, there's like 3 cards here that are extremely high power level that I think are worth considering, so we're not like easily snapping off one of them.
The trick is you either have to make a pack with no good cards or a pack with like 7 of them to keep the discussion going.
All cards are good, Eck. It just depends on how you use them. Yes, if you're going to kind of jam, I'm sure the first pack that we decide to debate on the show will have either multiple pieces of power or things that we think can clearly challenge power. But here, it pretty quickly breaks down to Library of Alexandria, Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Mana Vault.
And I think of those 3, Mana Vault is a distant third.
I don't think it... I mean, this is coming from the guy that just casually passes Grim Monolith all day long, so I'm not surprised by what you're saying. But fast mana should not be overlooked under any circumstance. I think that it's just by saying that we could put it with these other 2 cards is a big deal for fast mana and should not be overlooked. Turn 2 Gideon Juras happen a lot. Thanks to cards like...
Jace is so insane, though. I mean, how often do you lose with Jace? It just doesn't feel like it happens very often.
Yeah, I mean...
Jace might be one of, the biggest, percentage gains to your win rate for any cube deck that can play it.
If played properly. I think Jace still has a high skill level involved. It's a very clearly a good card. I mean, surprisingly
Sure.
enough,
But
Library of Alexandria has a surprisingly high skill level involved with it as well.
All of our listeners are exceptionally good at Magic, so
Obviously.
clearly, I think Jace is like the only. I mean, like Jace and Library are actually really close.
Okay, well, maybe that's really the bigger picture from this pack.
And it's kind of weird because, like, Library is colorless and Jace got double blue, but Library is so clearly at its best in blue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, when I kind of looked at this pack as 15 cards, and I was like, I take Library first a lot of times, first overall in a draft, and there will definitely be times where I'll end up drafting, like, red-green aggro after I first picked a Library of Alexandria, and, obviously Library will always make my deck. Obviously, I'm always going to play it. I'm never going to be sad that I drew it. It just is going to be, not even like blasted landscape sometimes. It's just going to tap for colorless, and it's going to be a land, and that's going to be fine. It's just not going to be a blowout like cards like Mana Vault, Jace the Mind Sculptor, maybe even Karn Liberated could always be when you have the opportunity to cast them.
Yeah, Jace is just, like, never bad. I mean, the only time Jace is bad is when you have the mana to cast it.
Yes, or you're in a situation where you'd lose to drawing almost any card anyway.
Yeah, like if you're like at 1% to live, Jace is probably not getting you out of that hole.
Unsummoning a guy still means you're dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, like the fact that Jace plays offense and defense both so well, and like just breaks stalls so much harder. Like, Library will eventually break stalls because you're drawing so many cards, but oftentimes it requires so much time to set up. Like, if the board gets gummed up or the game kind of stalls out when you have 4 cards in your hand and you draw Library, you're kind of like, okay, sweet, in 3 turns I'm going to start getting ahead. Whereas Jace, like, immediately puts the pressure on your opponent to act because it's so powerful and it warps the game so hard.
No, agreed. I think it's a good time. We kind of come right out of the gate with these pick one, pack one scenarios, and the room doesn't usually populate very quickly. But of the people that are already here, it's kind of broken down into Camp Library, Camp Jace, and Sam or Smidster or Sam Pardee, depending on how you know him, where you know him from, or the lesser half of Cheryl and Sam, again, depending on where you know him from, has kind of broken it down to Jace is just so powerful all the time whenever you draw him. And that the more he's thought about it, Mana Vault might actually be better than Library in Cube, which I think is an important thing to touch on, because I think a lot of people get kind of caught up in the magic and the long-standing power of a card like Library of Alexandria, and they don't stop to think of how it actually plays out in a limited format. And yes, in games where you have it in your opening hand, your win percentage is staggeringly larger, and I don't even need to do the real math to be able to tell you that. I've played enough games where the guy who has it is just so far ahead it's ridiculous. While cards like Mana Vault and Jace can both kind of either catch you up to surpass where your opponent's board state is, or securely lock you in being in the lead in a game, if not winning automatically. And I think with Jace, one of the things that a lot of the pro players have said about him over the long run is that it's a card that you win with, that a lot of players don't necessarily know that they're even winning when they cast it first.
It's not obvious. Like, sometimes it's just 4 mana for unsummon, gain some amount of life.
That's even assuming that there's a clearly visible line of play with Jace when you play it.
Right, but I'm saying it's almost like its lowest power iteration.
I think its lowest power iteration is when a player plays it poorly. I think when a player plays it onto maybe a stalled or maybe slightly disadvantaged board, uses the brainstorm function because they think that's what card advantage is. That player doesn't necessarily have a way to take advantage of that brainstorm effect, and then has their Jace killed. Yeah. And then it ends up drawing the subsequent cards and not having to have an impact. I think there's a lot of ways to play it wrong, and maybe that's where it kind of gets lost in its true power level. Now, all things being equal, I've taken Library in a pack like this many times. I've had it just be land the task for colorless in most games I'll play in a draft. It's still been fine, no complaints. I've taken Mana Vault out of packs very similar to this, and done some really broken things early in the game that I think are very, very powerful, and ultimately it comes down to, are those things better than just the raw power level of a card like Jace the Mind Sculptor? And again, I have a bit of a blue bias here. So I think we're in a day and age now where I'm with the majority. I think I'm taking Jace.
I think I agree. And it might just be because I haven't drafted a blue deck in a while, and that always kind of skews perception to some degree. But Jace is just like such an elbow drop on so many opponents that Library never will be. And, Mana Vault's good, but it requires a lot of other stuff to come up in the draft.
No, it doesn't. It just needs spells that cost more mana than other spells.
Right, but you still have to get the good ones.
That's not hard.
Jace is just going to always be good. It sends it gives you a very clear idea of what you want to do. I think I'm just taking Jace here.
It goes many ways. I think that, again, the more you play Magic with Jace, the more opportunities you're going to have to see how much it really can do, and how many ways it can actually manipulate a game into... Again, we talk about Jace being good all the time. When you're behind, it might unsummon a critical creature. It might allow you to draw into an answer with Brainstorm. If you're at board parity, it clearly starts to take advantage of a game because you have a Planeswalker that draws cards, a Planeswalker that can also manipulate people's draws. And if you're clearly ahead, talk about a win more scenario. Just being able to keep your opponent off of threats to your board with Jace is huge. And that's really kind of what it all breaks down to. I mean, we've talked about the three aspects of Jace, behind, ahead, or in the middle of the road. Unlike cards like Mana Vault, where if it's a bad top deck example, or not necessarily going to get you any further if you've drawn 8 or 9 mana sources and nothing in your deck costs more than 5.
Jace is rarely a bad top deck.
Yeah, that's another point in its favor, and I think that it's kind of skirting that line between, is the raw power of a card like Mana Vault better, worse, the same, or just different than the effect that Jace the Mind Sculptor has? Maybe Jace is too much of a safe pick in this scenario. Maybe I really want to just go off the deep end in ramp, aggro, combos, all these things, and just take the Mana Vault, and I wouldn't harm people for that. It's just funny that I would definitely take it over Library in this set of circumstances, because I'd want to draft blue cards with Library. I don't have to, but it's better there.
Alright.
But yeah,
so
you get the idea.
Let's go on. We have another couple scenarios that we want to touch on.
Yes, we do. So that's Pick 1, Pack 1, Power Extreme Edition, where we've got some sweet, sweet power cards. But let's get into some draft scenarios.
Okay, so this is the first one. So far you have drafted Elspeth, Knight Errant, Journey to Nowhere, Eternal Witness, and Kasali Pridemage. In the pack that you open at this point, you see Yawgmoth's Bargain, Stinkweed Imp, Wolfear Avenger, Slagstorm, Gilded Lotus, Pact of Negation, Stillmoon Cavalier, Mana Leak, Zealous Conscripts, Oath of Ghouls, Savannah Lions. What do you take?
That's some diversity there in cards. I think that
I was actually thinking about this one for a while I was MS painting these images together.
Giving away all the secrets.
I know, this is the behind the scenes.
You don't hand render these in Illustrator before we get here?
I actually paint them on an easel and then scan the easel.
I think the safe, easy pick is Stillmoon Cavalier.
Weird.
Yeah, you're looking at... you've got some white mana symbols in your pool. You could use another 3-drop that has protection from 2 colors. It kind of goes both ways. I think that's the safe card to take here.
I would almost say the safe card to take here is Wolfear Avenger.
Oh. Okay.
Typically the way... I know it doesn't look it right now because you have, 2 white cards, 1 green card, and a gold card. But decks like this typically end up being base green rather than base white.
Decks like this? Well, we have 4 cards. What do you mean a deck like this?
I'm green, white. You're clearly looking to, from your picks, you're a green, white kind of mid-rangey looking to be that way, right?
I still say you're 4 cards in. I think you're more open than that. You have 4 I think you have 4 very powerful cards. One of them happens to be double green. One of them happens to be double white.
Yeah.
I don't think that... I think this is a great scenario because I don't know how much of, a deck, quote-unquote, you have with these 4 cards. I think you could abandon green more likely than you could abandon white in this draft.
Yeah.
I think Elspeth into Journey to Nowhere is 2 very powerful cards. You have one of the best Planeswalkers in all of Magic and all of Cube. You have one of the premier removal spells for white. And then you have a clearly powerful card in Witness, clearly powerful. And you have an excellent card in Pride Mage. An excellent card in Pride Mage, it's only a single green, and some kind of Junk, Bant, Naya, Shell would still have access and want to play that card, which makes so many of these cards in this pack appealing. Slagstorm is an excellent kind of like mid-early game board sweeper if you're going to have Planeswalkers. A card like Zealous Conscripts is very high on power level. It's also only a single red. You've got Gilded Lotus to kind of go big and play a bunch of colors if you're Bant or Junk and go big. Even Bargain is in that same vein where it's an extremely powerful card.
Bargain would be a bold choice.
Yeah, I don't think you're taking Bargain here either. I'm just saying like there's a lot of powerful effects. They're bigger and they're across a lot of colors. And I don't think that like looking at these 4 cards, it's like, okay, I'm drafting a green-white deck. I'm drafting a green-white mid-range deck.
Yeah.
And just looking at the counter spells.
I mean, maybe that was kind of a shortcoming in the way I looked at it, was because Pride Mage and Witness kind of lend themselves like, I could very easily see like a green-white kind of mid-range creature-based deck that has these 4 cards in it. And I think that's kind of where I jump to. And in that kind of deck, I think Wolfir Avenger is a fine pick. But this is certainly a situation where, like Sam is saying in chat, like taking the Mana Leak and moving in blue, even taking Zealous Conscripts, trying to be Naya is fine, especially if you end up with some of the green creature tutoring. If you end up playing some amount of green. I think it's. I think that Stonewind Cavalier is also fine. I don't know if I would go outside of those 4 cards. Like Bargain seems like a very bold choice. Savannah Lions is a little too aggressive for my tastes. Slagstorm is okay, but I don't know how I feel about taking a double red right here.
No, to jump back in, I think Slagstorm is better than average. I think it's an excellent. I think it's underrated because that effect is so rare. But I don't want to go from double white, double green, green white, white to right to double red. And I think that in a pack like this, a lot more amateur players to cube or safer players to cube are going to take that Stonewind Cavalier, that Wolfir Avenger, because it's like, okay, I've got green mana, I've got white mana, I've got safe picks. Let's take some guys.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly not bad. I mean, in a green-white deck like this, you're certainly going to play Stonewind Cavalier, or you're going to play Wolfir Avenger.
Right. I think you're like slowly going down that road very early in the draft. And the thing about Cube is the packs are going to be potentially so powerful. The power level is going to be so high, and it isn't going to be always even color distribution. That I'm not into taking like a safe 3-drop creature right here when I could take a more powerful card like Zealous Conscripts or even Mana Leak. I think Mana Leak fits in really well with the cards we have with us right here. I think it's a little more bold to take Mana Leak. Now I understand where Sam's coming from, but I think I'd probably just take Zealous Conscripts here because of its power level. It's only being single red, and I don't think I'm drafting a green white mid-range deck yet. I mean, it could end up being that I throw away that Zealous Conscripts, I don't end up playing it. It could end up being that I would take the Wolfir Avenger, but the Wolfir Avenger would table. If I took that Wolfir Avenger or that Stonewind Cavalier, maybe Savannah Lions comes back and maybe I end up playing a green-white mid-range deck anyway. But I think that I have no problem maybe taking a one-off here, or maybe exploring new territory by just taking Zealous Conscripts, because that card's it's such a blowout.
All right.
So, at the end of the day, I'm taking Conscripts. What do you want to take?
I actually kind of like what Sam was thinking about taking Mana Leak. Trying to move into blue. Bant's a good color combination. Witness is also very good there. You could end up playing or splashing a lot of these different cards, and I don't feel like, even if you end up still straight white-green, you're not too disappointed you didn't get one of those cards in this pick.
So the chat, first of all, hi Kenny, thanks for showing up. It's been a little while. You don't really like Savannah Lions here. Still Moon is strong too. So what we were kind of talking about is Bargain is feasible. Yes, it is.
You can absolutely take and play Bargain. I mean, that would be the bold, left turn.
So just to kind of summarize, I don't want to look at these 4 cards and assume I'm playing a green-white creatures deck. I'm going to look at these 4 cards, especially the first 2 picks I had, realize the power level of them, and try to stay open to powerful effects. That's why I'm taking Conscripts over just a creature. You could end up in a green-white creature deck, and that deck could be good. It could end up winning the draft, because you have Elspeth, you have Journey, you might have some of those other Premier removal cards, but I don't think you have to kind of like commit or go down that road so much early in the draft like this.
Okay. Second pack. So this is the next pack. You have drafted so far Lightning Bolt, Inferno Titan, Wrath of God, Jungle Shrine. You see Cabal Interrogator, Torch Fiend, Smokestack, Elite Vanguard, Savage Lands, Lockstone Warhammer, Corpse Dance, Andric Stomphaler, Venser Shaper Savant, Tropical Island, and Avacyn's Pilgrim. And you can tell TSG put this one together because it's a red-white big spell stack. Which is like the consistent, like...
Well, it's so funny. Like, I love... it's not consistent, just because we happened to draft it the other time. It's funny to me, Inferno Titan is such a sweet card in our cube, because I've seen it go like first pick and 15th pick, and been totally okay the whole time with both those scenarios.
That card has no, like, fixed pick position.
Value, right.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of... I mean, obviously taking a first pick Lightning Bolt makes a lot of sense. Very, premier removal. Doesn't, you're not committed. Then you've seen Inferno Titan, probably the most raw power card in a pack, you take that. Now you're looking at Wrath of God, which is a, premier sweeper. Excellent card, you take that. And now you're like, alright, well, take some fixing and a tri-land. Now you're looking at some magic cards.
Some shit.
And you kind of have to make... you don't have to make a decision. You could just, snap off another dual land.
I mean, you could, but now you're... Like, the only benefit you have to taking a dual land is that now you have access to probably green as your, like, third splash... As, like, a third splash color, and you're now playing 2 come-into-play tap lands to get there, and...
You gotta stop assuming that Wrath of God is making our deck 100% of the time.
Well, okay, then you're just taking a bunch of come-into-play tapped red lands?
Maybe.
That's pretty fucking terrible.
I don't know. If you have good removal, you could play 5-color, and you could be a little bit slower than the average bear. I don't think that's a big problem.
I mean, if you want to play 5-color, that's fine, but I think you don't take... I don't...
Snap the Warhammer?
Yeah.
That is a big floppy trap.
Yeah,
I'm glad... I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm glad someone fell into that trap. But Lockstone Warhammer is definitely in this pack as a trap.
Lockstone Traphammer, it's just so slow.
Yeah. I mean... trust me, there are decks for Hammer, and there are definitely scenarios for Hammer. It's funny how nowadays, like, I've definitely considered taking Warhammer out of the cube a few times recently, and it ends up being a huge kind of like swing in aggro mirrors, that it's almost like a premier sideboard card, as where, like, a color hoser could be in the MTGO cube.
I mean...
But I don't want to take, similar to how we evaluate swords, and we've talked about in previous episodes, Hammer is like, spend 6 mana... then hopefully impact the board, where, in game 1 of a match or against random opponents, you could be walking into this big time walk style trap. It's hard to, like, just snap it off there. Okay, we have votes coming in for almost all the cards, it feels like, at this point, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, Warhammer is really slow, If you're trying to stay on color here, you're pretty disappointed with whatever is available.
Well, look, we're only 4 picks into a pack. Like,
right.
On color is...
Well, right. I'm not... But at the same time, like, just taking the most powerful spell out of every pack, regardless of color, is a great way to end up with 45 cards and 17 playables.
Okay, so if I was going to look at just on power level, the raw power level cards in this pack, I'm looking at, like, Venser Corpse Dance.
Sure. I would probably give a nod to Corpse Dance over Venser in that specific argument, just because of color considerations.
But we're not. We're just talking about raw power level.
Sure.
Okay. So,
I mean, I think that I'm kind of a fan of Stomphaler if we want to play like a slower deck. I don't like Torchfiend or Elite Vanguard. I don't think Cabal Interrogator or Venser or Avacyn's Pilgrim are worth moving into a color for. Smokestack and Warhammer are both really slow. The only cards I would really take out of this pack are Stomphaler, Savage Lands, and Tropical Island.
Huh.
Like, we already have, like, if we want to play 5-color, then you can certainly take a dual land, and it wouldn't be the worst. You just have to be really careful about how many slow dual lands you take, like the tri-land that come into play tapped.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you end up, even if you have good removal, if you end up with a bunch of lands that come into play tapped, like, you're just going to be so behind so often that it's not going to matter.
So I would pose, when evaluating tap lands, whether it be Ravnica bounce lands, Shards Tri lands, maybe future Mirage tap lands, it's easier to take them up front and then reevaluate things like removal versus be like, oh, I'm going to take all the Journey to Nowhere's, Stagger Shocks, Burst Lightnings, Diabolic Edicts, Go for the Throats I can get, and then I'm going to pick up all the dual lands. Like, I don't think that that is really a way that you can go. I think that you have to make sure you can play the colors to be able to play the spells if you're going to go down that road. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee one way or the other. I just think, I don't, like, when evaluating tap lands, if you're going to take more of them, I think you're going to want to do it earlier to keep your options open versus do it in reverse.
Sure, but, again, you just have to be aware that, like, if you're playing a deck that has more than, I would say, 3 or more enter the battlefield tapped every time lands, like, be wary. You're going to be on the slow side. You really need to shore up your 1 and 2 drops so that you can interact early in the game.
So for me, personally, in this pack, I'm going to narrow it down to 3 cards. I'm going to say it's between Torch Fiend, Inkwood Stomp Howler, and Corpse Dance for me. I don't think Pilgrim really plays into the whole, like, Pilgrim into Wrath of God plan. We don't have a green card yet, and I think I'd rather have the Stomp Howler to kind of go with this whole, like, maybe play early removal into more like Haymakers kind of plan. But I also have no problem with kind of one-offing Corpse Dance here, just because it's so powerful, and that there's no way that effect should actually just be single black. I don't know how that really ever ended up being a thing. I mean, obviously, like, Corpse Dance is a huge mistake in design all over the place, but the fact that you can play creature decks that get this card advantage with all these ETB creatures with Corpse Dance is huge, and that's my pick.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Stomp Howler here. I'm fine with it. I would look to try and limit the amount of slow spells I'm going to take, but I think it's fine. Yeah.
So no love for Smokestacks at the end of the day, though?
Never any love for Smokestacks.
Okay. I will give a little love to Smokestacks, saying that I still really like that card. Maybe it's a slow upheaval, maybe it's a fast braids.
You also love braids, though.
Yeah.
So, like, you're clearly just wrong about a lot of these things.
I'm not hating Smokestacks. I just think that any deck with an Inferno Titan in it that you want to play is not the same deck where you're touching a
that's
Smokestacks.
certainly true.
I think that's really what this boils down to. Like, Smokestacks does cool stuff. It just does cool stuff in the deck that also had Avacyn's Pilgrim and Torch Fiend, not the deck that has Inferno Titan and Wrath of God.
Alright. So we got a third one today. Bonus pack.
Whoa! Now, we talked a lot about, like, doing a scenario different than, your 4 picks in. And I like 4 picks in because I think that you start to get an idea of where you want to go. I think, obviously, with 1, 2, or 3 cards, the sky is still really the limit. Even with 4 cards, I still think the sky is the limit, as we saw from an example earlier today. And I don't want to go, like, too deep into a draft, because then the people listening to the podcast side of this are going to listen to Eck talk for half an hour, telling you what card names are, and get lost.
Right.
But we'll try a bit of an amalgamation. This particular set of cards was from my draft last week. In order. It ended up being quite a spicy brew. But here it is. Eck will let you know.
Alright, so in this pack, you have 6 cards. Solemn Simulacrum, Cold Steel Heart, Grim Monolith, Mind Stone, Rakdos Key Rune, Winds of Wrath.
A sweet and spicy brew, I might add.
The pack that you see has Obsidat Ghost Council, River Boa, Simic Growth Chamber, Silverblade Paladin, Gisela Blade of Gold Knight, Platinum Angel, Looter Ilkor, Dismiss, Grim Lavamancer.
What do you want, Eck?
I want Gisela, because I want to drop that hammer on absolutely everybody, because that card is so completely ridiculous.
It's a good card. I agree.
Obsidat is sweet. There are people already talking about Obsidat in chat. My problem with Obsidat in this deck is it's certainly good, but you have all this... You're already, like... A lot of your cards are not working that well with Obsidat. Like, Grim Monolith into Obsidat's pretty bad.
It's one. Is it one colorless?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the best. Well, you obviously Grim Monolith into Rakdos Key Rune, obviously.
Well, okay, yeah, but I would still rather Grim Monolith into Gisela. Drop the hammer on people.
Yeah.
That card is if you have not yet had the pleasure of being attacked by Gisela or attacking with her, trust me when I say that is one of the swingiest cards in the entire cube and is well warranted her crazy mana cost.
And it's not even that. It's double white, single red, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 4 red, white.
I think when I initially saw that card, I kind of assumed it was like double in some colorless, so I kind of like gave it a pass over for a while.
Even if it was double, that card would still be good.
It's just let's just say X lost some matches to this card, and
I've won with it too.
Good.
It's gone both ways.
Now, in this particular draft, I can remember clearly I took the Growth Chamber because I thought I had a very clear plan of somehow finding the balance, or maybe just Oath of Druids. I don't remember what I was thinking. I was definitely gonna like.
You couldn't take Oath of Druids because I had it.
So the bigger picture story here is that somehow Eck was sitting directly on my right in this draft from last week. And as I was drafting like 5 color, like brown, being like, okay, I'm gonna get a balance, I might get an Oath, I might get a Tooth and Nail, I might just like cast an Eldrazi. Like I have this Wrath of God, I'm gonna find some more Wrath of Gods. We're gonna do some cool stuff. And Eck was on my right and managed to take both Oath of Druids and Balance in the draft. So not only were they in the draft, not only were they right next to me, but then
awesome.
It just stopped. I got Justice because I beat him in the 3rd round when we had to play each other because my deck was not affected by cards like Oath of Druids or Balance.
Right, we didn't interact very much.
No, I think I just killed you with some key runes and some man lands.
Right, and I was like sitting and staring at Oath of Druids like, damn you.
Yeah.
I boarded it out.
That was a sweet match. Like, it was this excellent match of Magic.
Back to this big and
I think we can all agree it's Gisela.
I think that Obsidat certainly has a case for him, but I think that on raw power level, Gisela beats out Obsidat, which is quite the statement because Obsidat's really, really good. And especially in our deck of Accelerants,
Accelerants and Fixers. I mean, we've got...
Gisela costing more is not going to be that big of a deal over Obsidat. Like, we're going to be able to jump that 2 mana without too much of a problem. And that thing is just such a beating. Like, whoo. If we say instead of Grim Monolith and Mindstone,
if that
had like,
let's just like just replace Grim Monolith with like Chromatic Lantern,
right? Then Obsidat becomes a lot more attractive.
Yeah.
Or anything, color-based acceleration, Obsidat gets a lot better. But because we're just going like the raw colorless mana route, Gisela kind of jumps that gap, and I think it's pretty clearly Gisela.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful card, and, the best thing about just drafting the Mana Rocks early, and which is kind of why this example is good for this week, is, you don't really want to pass those 2 mana Accelerants, and yes, Gisela is nuts, it's a very good card, but it's almost like a B or C 2nd or 3rd tier card in that set of circumstances. Like, I would rather the cards I mentioned prior in big spells, I would rather, big sweepers into big, almost more impactful initially big guys. Gisela is one of those cards that is almost like really good on the natural, where you're going to be behind, you're going to lay it, and all of a sudden you negate
completely changes.
You negate your opponent's board. As we're in more of a ramp strategy, if your opponent doesn't have that much of a board presence, sure, Gisela attacks twice and they're dead, but you didn't, that's all it was there for. It was just a 10 power guy. It wasn't like keeping you alive into something. Maybe it just speaks to the power level of Gisela. It's a very good Magic card.
So that was fun.
Seems like we just blazed through those today. I don't know about you.
It took 35 minutes.
We didn't start right on the dot, though. We were dicking around. Some of us were reading Visions Revealed. That's right. I love old Magic
That's right.
books.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is spoiler season in 1996.
Not even. This is 95.
Oh, is it 95?
Yeah, Visions was still 95.
The 94 spoiler season was a stone tablet that they brought down from the mountain. Hey, it's Gerds.
I don't know. Who is that?
He's another streamer.
Okay.
I run into him a lot. He's from Down Under. So when I get on at night, he's on streaming, so I popped on.
Kind of a little reverse action now.
Yeah.
This is like he's eating breakfast or something, just checking out.
Pretty much. All right, so
just
today,
missed the crack packs. It's true.
Today we are talking about fringe cards. We've taken some input from the community about cards that are teetering on the edge of inclusivity. I don't know.
Keep train wrecking it.
So
before we go there, I think it's important. Okay. We'll touch on things that have been main topics recently, but this week we're either ahead of the game or there's been no traction. For example, if you make the card, still no update this week.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're coming through tens of thousands of submissions. So
some poor intern is just crying in a cubicle.
Please, that would be amazing. Additionally, I think it's I don't know what it is this season, but a lot of the Dragon's Maze content in general and cube content is like ahead of the curve, ahead of the game. There have already been shows talking about it in podcast form. There have been most articles from sources you would expect to see out there have already kind of reported in. And the overall consensus is the Dragon's Maze is not very exciting.
It's
just... But other sources feel this way. I was surprised. I thought it was more impactful for Cube than Gatecrash.
There's a lot of content. Like, I think this trend will continue in terms of, as streaming becomes more popular, as more voices kind of enter the Magic community. There are more websites that have articles and videos and things like that. I mean, look at us. We're a relatively new content source. So as these kind of expand and more personalities join the game and more people want to talk about it, you're going to see it faster and faster, especially as things like the information in the set get given out to the community more quickly. People... there's more people testing, there's more people to report on testing, there's more opinions.
There's just more diversity in cubes. I mean, there's more, but I would think that would mean that there would be more cards that people would be interested in. I would think that it's like, oh, my so-and-so reason to be cubing thing.
I think the biggest problem with why Dragon's Maze was unexciting for Cube is that in the vast majority of cubes, you've got, like, look at ours, right? We've got 90 white cards, 90 blue cards, and 6 white-blue cards. So in that set, there's only 10 of each color that could even make it, including commons and everything else. And then all these white-blue cards, or whatever, and they have to be so much better to compete in that really small spot. So, like, the relative power level of gold cards just has to be so much higher. You watching hockey?
I can't. They're all on major networks, so my app will not let me watch them. I can keep the scores up.
That's too bad.
I know. I actually need a physical television in here.
There is one. I'm not going to break it out, though. Anyway, so, yeah, like...
I think it's an amalgamation of these things. I think that Return to Ravnica was so rich for Cube. There were just so many cards at the end of the day that people were so excited about, whether or not it was things that we ended up adding, or other prominent sources ended up adding, that when Gatecrash came around, people were so like...
I think that's also...
It's the other half. It's the other side. Bring it. Where's the 20 cards?
It's also a function of... because it's 5 multicolored combinations in one set and the other 5 in the other. Like, Return to Ravnica, like... has been historically kind of underwhelming for Cube. Seeing a big new patch of blue-red cards.
I almost wanted to make that a topic for today, actually. There was a lot of talk. Jay Bush, who we still need to get on the damn show. That was what he was asking about on Twitter.
Golgari, has been very, at least one-dimensional for a long time. So seeing a bunch of new Golgari cards. Whereas, you look at, like, in Gatecrash, like, red-green's super deep. White-black is surprisingly deep. Red-white got some new additions for sure, but it doesn't have as much space. I think it's just a matter of how it was distributed. Like if theoretically Return to Ravnica was like green-white and blue-black and blue-white and like green-red,
okay,
and red-black,
okay, then
it would be like much less exciting because it's just like, oh, well, nothing can compete with the cards they've already printed in these multicolored slots for Cube.
I don't know. I think that's being strangely overcritical. I'm just surprised. Yeah, I'm just surprised. Dragon's Maze, not that exciting. I mean, we ended up between last week and this week. I think I scaled it back like 2 or 3 cards. I don't remember if I included that in the show notes.
Oh yeah. Toil and Trouble not going to make the cut.
So it's like what we ended up doing is we kind of ended up like giving 2 more cards like a Stay of Execution in the cube. One was Standstill, just because it was such a cute interaction with Notion Thief. You can't lay the standstill first. Let's be clear.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But the thing about standstill in Cube is that either players will play it when they're clearly ahead and winning, and probably going to win anyway, or they'll never cast it because they're not sure where advantage is in the game, or they don't have a man land or an Aether Vial or something.
The only time I've ever been happy to have standstill is when I also had Sun Titan.
The only time I've ever been happy to have standstill is way more circumstances than that, including the times I have Mutavault, a Worldway Command Land, heaven forbid Aether Vial. But the thing about Notion Thief is you don't necessarily have to be clearly ahead to cast standstill. If you have Notion Thief, regardless of the board, you can cast standstill and then probably just draw 3 cards.
Treat it like hatching plans, kind of.
Yeah, and I thought that was...
I do like me a hatching plans.
Do you?
Yeah. Okay. The blue-red deck?
Yeah. It's a good deck. So that got a bit of a stay of execution. And then as far as Rakdos goes, we didn't want to... I mean, we still want to keep something else in the mix other than Terminates and forecasting cost cards.
Right.
And Toil and Trouble, initially I felt like it was going to give us
It's
more...
very easy to fall into those traps.
Yeah, I mean,
your
whole red-black section could just be 4-drops. Or it could just be Terminate Friends, Wrecking Ball, and Bit Blast.
And it's just like any of it. Like, Red Green could be nothing but guys. Green and White could certainly be nothing but guys.
I think that's the last exciting card from Gatecrash that we didn't really cover in our Gatecrash show, which was the Llanowar Elf
Zerta
Darts card. Yeah. I still the thing about my mana accelerant guys is I never want them to be 2 colors.
No.
So that kind of breaks my balls right out of the gate.
I also don't want them to cost 2 mana.
They can cost 2 mana.
Not if they tap for 1. That's way less exciting.
I mean, that's Mind Stones.
Is he a 1/1 or a 2/2?
You can do 1/1.
Doesn't even brawl. Man.
What exactly are you designing? Whoa. This guy costs more than 1 mana, and he's just a 1/1? What the hell?
Landmore dead.
Yeah, that card was never cubable, though.
No, but I'm saying, that's a 2 mana, double colored mana guy who's a 2/2. I think that, power creep his ad con enough that we can staple on the 1 damage thing.
It's weird, because to me, I would rather have the, 1/1 unblockable almost, but still always add a mana to your pool. The thing about that guy is he is 1/1 unblockable.
Yeah.
He's also always an accelerant. You never have to, pick and choose with your mana creatures if they're going to attack or they're going to, add their mana. This guy always does both.
Yeah, but at 2/2, you can keep them back to block. And then if they don't attack, then you just, Spectral Searchlight, get them at the end of turn.
Yeah. I still think that is better than, let's say, what was it, a Steward of... The guy from Shards of Alara, there's a 2/2 for green and white. He had Vigilance, and he also tapped for green.
Oh, yeah.
That's, the closest card I can think of that compares to what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, those have Steward of Valoron. There we go. That is what we're looking for. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, there's all this talk right now about things like Dragon's Maze, and obviously there's a lot of hype with the pre-release going on. It feels weird to take a week during that haze and not talk about it, but I think that we've thoroughly covered it. And until we really get in the trenches with the cards and have a better feel for what's awesome and what's...
It's also not the biggest set,
for Cube or in general.
Just in terms of number of cards. If it was 300 cards, it'd be a lot more to talk about.
We still would have covered it in one show.
That'd been a long show.
People do it all the time.
Alright, so...
Today's main topic, as we might have touched on once already...
Cards people think are bad. The show. Let's get right into it.
I think there's more to it than that. So we posted something on Reddit, mentioned it on Twitter before. Actually, this is a good time to point out the email address, draftcube@gmail.com. If you have really any questions, comments, feedback, dick pics, anything you want to send our way, Eck checks that regularly. So it will be included in the show, and we'll get everything out there. Yeah. So
this is a list of some of the suggestions brought in from the community for cards that sometimes you have to fight to justify their existence.
Maybe it just requires an explanation. Maybe it's... The Leafs already scored!
See what I put up with?
Van Riemsdyk, baby! No, wait, not Van Riemsdyk? Where's the... Anyway... Yes, Van Riemsdyk. Sorry. Didn't want to get distracted. Recently, in the draft from last week, one of the other cards that was in my deck that we talked about was Shrapnel Blast, and then that kind of spun into a conversation with people like Chris Bakula, who is very artifact based in his cube and loves these cards, and Usman about Shrapnel Blast viability in cube, and I was surprised to find out that like the Meddling Mage himself doesn't run it when he loves the Browntown.
I like it. I mean,
and that's the thing between us. Eck defends this card a lot more than I do. I've definitely had it on the Let's Pull It list several times, and it somehow managed to keep having staying power.
5 damage for 2 mana is a big game. Like, that is a huge chunk of your opponent's face.
Yes.
And that's really where, I mean, is it the best in the, like, mono brown accelerator deck where you've got a bunch of Mind Stones to throw?
Yes.
But that's also not exactly where the effect is the most desired. Like, a lot of times it's removal there.
Agreed.
But, like, at the same token, like, I've played plenty of mono-red aggressive decks, or, red-white aggressive decks that have a couple pieces of equipment, or a curse scroll or something, and when you get to just chuck one of those at your opponent's face, to dome them out from a ton.
Dream, and the thing about Cube is you always want to think of the dreams, and not rely on the dreams, but know they're out there. Are obviously Tanglewire and Sensei's Divining Top. One is very clear, it runs out of counters and you throw it before it would go away by itself. Top is mildly less intuitive, but you can just stack the draw trigger and sack it, so you effectively get to draw a card and also
old school
nug things.
Old school Mirrodin Kamigawa standard.
Yeah, that was when like the big red decks. So yeah, 2 mana, 5 damage. We're like 20 goblins short of running Goblin Grenade by itself. It's a lot of damage. The question is, are there enough artifacts to make this real? What is it really doing? Is that enough?
I think it is.
Last week it was really good for me. I only had like 4 ways to kill Gaddock Teeg, and this was one of them.
Sometimes you gotta kill Gaddock Teeg.
Yeah, my deck was full of like Chandras, Jaces, Ajani's, Abysses, Wrath of Gods at the end of the day. And there were not that many ways to deal with Teeg, and this was one of the few of them. Are we done here? I think you have to have those things. I don't think it's a clear include.
I think it's as long as artifacts are a significant portion of your cube.
Like what? Like is there a percentage that like you're clearly adding this card in?
Yeah, I think that like look at our cube. We've got 700 cards and 80 artifacts, 85 something like that.
I hope it's maybe 90.
It's something like that.
We will consult the list.
So I mean, I think that our list is artifact heavy enough to support this card without too much of a problem.
Yeah,
90.
Yeah, 90 and 700.
So a full, almost a seventh of the cards in cube. Most decks are going to have a couple artifacts. Most decks can have more if they want them. And, giving those decks access to a really big burn spell like that is fine.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. I still think it could get cut one of these days. I don't think it's like 100%.
I agree with the pardon the interruption timer on cards. We don't need a 20-minute soliloquy on all of these.
You just need to make sure you get the point across. I just felt like there was still conversation to have here about it.
Humility.
This one is one actually from email. I've never actually played Humility in Cube, and I think it might have to do with the fact that I just don't want to have to keep looking up the rules while I play Magic.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Gatherer page, and it's just like this endless rulings list that just goes on forever.
You can definitely say it's a poor man's moat. You can definitely make an argument.
It's certainly impactful, but I feel like the headaches on this are probably not worth it. Like, the rules text, especially like...
But let's try to evaluate it from simply a power level standpoint, because we play Cube, and maybe this kind of bleeds into the conversation about like Sensei's Divining Top, because we've been talking a lot recently about cutting Divining Top for...
Quality of life.
I was going to say time.
Quality of life. I mean, I think of this the same way. Like,
our rounds are timed.
So?
All right, go on.
I don't want to have to try and explain layering in the middle of a cube draft, so this card will work. I think that if it was that everyone who ever played with your cube knew exactly how this card worked and all the interactions with it, then it's okay.
You might have brought up a good point here. For people that run like the all Japanese cube or the all foreign language of any variety cube, where you kind of expect players to have knowledge of the game, I more endorse humility because we know it's a strong card. We know it does a lot.
If you never play, if the more people that you introduce to your cube who have not seen it before, the worse cards like this become.
The less fun this will ever be.
Because it just becomes, like, especially for players who haven't been playing for a really long time, they're going to have to stop and read every card anyway. And if you then include this, and they're like, okay, well, what does that mean? What if I do this? And it's like, no, that's not how the layering works, blah, blah, blah. Like, and that's just a conversation I never want to ever have at a cube draft. Especially when you probably have to have every week.
I mean, Kenny has graciously juxtaposed the conversation for us. He's saying if you play Moat, you should play Humility. And I'm still saying we play Magic and we hope to have fun most of the time. And Humility is 9 times out of 10 the opposite of that.
Humility is just too much of a headache. Like, it's certainly very powerful, and I think that if everybody knew exactly how it worked, then you could certainly make an argument for humility.
And so our cube is not like that. Our cube is all English. It's all readable to the majority of people that walk up. Moat is fun. I like Moat. Anyway,
you like Moat.
I love Moat.
So humility, I think, just a little too complicated for new players.
I mean, that is a great fence card. Like, I think humility is one of those cards where you can see it in cubes, you can not see it in cubes. I think that both sides of the conversation completely defendable and completely right in their own way.
Tendrils of Agony.
Maybe the cornerstone of what most people would consider combo in cube.
Especially with the return of the Magic Online cube, this becomes a more relevant point of discussion. Storm is present there. So the question constantly, should Storm be in cube or not?
See, I think when we had our episode where we talked about packages, we didn't discuss Storm that much.
We very glossed over it.
Yeah, because we don't run it, and I think that there's just too many cards that you have to make strategies like this viable or cards like this viable.
Tendrils of Agony, is not by itself. Tendrils of Agony brings friends, and those friends all are bad outside of the Tendrils of Agony plan.
Again, I love to come back to conversations I've had with people past where it's like, you just run Pyretic Ritual in your cube. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? No, it's totally decent outside of the Storm deck. Like, no, it's not.
It's Seismic Assault on turn 2.
It's just garbage when you don't have these things.
Yeah. But so, that's the problem I have with the Storm deck. If you include it in your cube, you have to include all of it, which means the rituals, the turnabout,
And at this point, you can't just play Tendrils. You kind of have to play Brain Freeze, probably Mind's Desire.
Empty the Warrens.
And definitely empty the Warrens.
You definitely probably are playing Time Spiral.
Definitely, probably. Yes, you're playing Time Spiral.
You're
playing Dream Halls. Again, the powered MTGO cube over the holidays kind of had that whole package for people, and you got to see it work. I think that without having all of those cards that are really just not real picks outside of those decks, you just take too much away from your cube and you lower the playability, and you almost make something that's just too narrow and too singular and kind of maybe really rewards one guy at the table if all those cards are there.
Right.
And that's kind of where combo cubes exist by themselves. They're probably 360 card environments. They're probably set to have all the cards you know of be in play at one time.
The Storm deck is a lot like the Tolarian Academy problem writ large, whereas now you've got 24 cards in your cube that no one else wants, except one guy maybe. And so, you either end up with everybody gets some crappy 15th picks, or one guy just, goes crazy and takes all the rituals, and then, has a Storm deck. And it's just, why not just have cards that are good in multiple decks and show up more?
But completely agree. Going over to the chat here, we have a long, quick question.
He wants to know how much he should pay for Near Mint Power.
How much you should pay for Near Mint Power. Well, let's not really have time for that one. The best and the quickest answer is consult major resources that are vendors. Don't go to TCG Player because there's not enough power listed there. But see what the price is for Troll are, and Card Kingdom, and places like Cool Stuff that aren't listed on TCG. Also go to eBay and see what closing costs on things are, and then that'll give you kind of a good idea of what you're going to pay for near mint. And again, if you're only buying near mint, you're probably dealing with somebody that deals in a lot of it. It's not like it's a player or somebody just like has one they're interested in moving, so it becomes a whole different thing. Like I don't think you need to like specifically find near mint power to be able to like buy it and make it worthwhile. I think there's a lot more room for play and margins on things that aren't near mint. But we'd rabbit hole down a whole other situation there. Hopefully that's helpful. Problem with Tendrils is that non-Tendrils decks just will not be interested in any of the cards. I'm summarizing what Sam has written. That's completely agreed. We also have more of the funny comments, like why would you want to watch someone play Solitaire?
Well, Sam makes a great point. In the cases that Storm gets there and one guy drafts that deck, the end result is completely like one-sided games of Magic.
They can be. Like I think that in Cube is the power for a cube only. Okay, that's a separate side question. I don't want to get detracted, too derailed here. So in Cube, I still think that you can end up in a scenario where someone kind of has created a solitaire environment. Like, I've talked about trying to add cards, literally solitary confinement to the Cube. I think there could be a fun, eventually make an interactive environment involving scenarios like that for great constructed decks of decades past, literally. Because I loved playing solitary confinement was in standard and extended and so on.
Bring in Squee.
Yeah. I mean, we're already bringing in Bazaar. It's really difficult, and we've stayed away from that because are there other ways to play a card like solitary confinement other than I've now made this game one-sided, good luck?
Yeah.
And in some scenarios, like, there's play to Oath of Druids. Things will happen. You can adjust strategies, play differently, learn new things about the game you're playing while you're doing it. Can you do that with solitary confinement? Probably a little bit less.
Considerably less?
Maybe. Like, you can craft scenarios. We have those tools to get rid of graveyards.
Does solitary confinement prevent all damage?
Oh my gosh, it's so sweet. It does prevent all damage.
Okay, so like Sulfuric Vortex doesn't get through?
Sulfuric Vortex, no good.
Okay.
Well, it depends on how the wording and the layering works. Like, damage can't be prevented. Like, you could skull crack them.
You can't target them.
Oh, you could skull crack yourself and then have the vortex hit them.
What?
Because on Skullcrack it says damage can't be prevented this turn.
Oh, I see. Okay.
If there are two or something.
Sure.
So maybe there's more play there than we were thinking about.
Okay, I'm trying not to help you. Next up on the list, again, fringe cards, Fast Bond.
And its cousin, Exploration.
Yeah, Fast Bond, Exploration, split card. I really don't like Fast Bond. I mean, I certainly see, on terms of raw power level, why it gets included. Just dump all the lands in your hand. That's super good. Like, it's awesome acceleration. But at the same time, it's kind of like... I don't know. It's hard to put into words.
So, here's my feelings about Fast Bond and Exploration. Because we've actually had both of them in the cube separately at separate times. And then in the Holiday Cube for MTGO, there was also Exploration, and I felt like it was just a literal blank. Because either it's in your opening hand, and for Exploration's sake, it's like, not even Explore. Like, if it's in your opening hand, you cast it, you play another land. So that turn, you kind of cast Rampant Growth, but you're down a card in your hand.
You cast Nature's Lore for 1 mana.
Sure. Then next turn, maybe you play 2 lands, which means that your hand, out of the 8 cards you had access to, half of them were land. 1 of them was an Exploration. And now you have 3 spells left. Hopefully one of those 3 spells costs 4 and is like a Hero Bladehold or something.
Yeah, that's ideal.
You could be like slightly more ideal than that. Like, you cast Harmonize on turn 2.
I'm
like, obviously one of those mana is green, so like I don't know how much that's going to affect you.
I don't know.
But that's best case scenario with Explore, which is just not anywhere close to good enough. So then you take it one step further, and then you go to Fast Bond. Like, okay, now I have an opening hand with Fast Bond, 4 lands and a spell, and now I've kind of constructed a Lotus.
Right, you've puked your entire hand on the table, and if they kill it, like, okay, well, I guess my top decks are better because I have all these lands in play. but that's about it.
And we're not even talking about the normal sets of circumstances where you are in the middle of a game and you draw this stupid enchantment.
Right.
That now does nothing.
Like turn 5, oh, cool. Now I have his fast bond. Sweet.
Like, sure, in an upheaval deck, you can get new life into it, or maybe a Jockelhops.
One upside to fast bond is if you Mindslaver an opponent who has fast bond and they draw a bounce land, you kill them.
Oh, great.
So, there's that.
You got that going for you.
All things after the newest cube update, because bounce lands and Mindslaver are getting cut.
Yeah. Baby bathwater, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Okay.
So at the end of the day, I definitely know people that have experimented with fast bond exploration. I do not. I mean, it's not so much like an endorsement. I just don't think there's anything there to do. Like either, similar to like talking about like Storm, you just either go off and hopefully do something that just automatically wins the game, or this card just doesn't do anything and is probably terrible.
Yeah. Next up, Tezzeret the Seeker. We'll go with classic Tezzeret.
Yeah, the one-armed Tezzeret and not the Hollow Brother Tezzeret. I'm not ignoring your question. There's a Twitter statement about all these things, like the internet is full of answers to your questions. I'm answering new questions.
So Tezzeret, we were talking about artifact-heavy decks earlier, and artifact-heavy cubes, and how much do you put in to support them, and things like that. So in the case of Shrapnel Blast, that effect is really powerful because it's removal a lot of time. It can kill opponents from pretty far off. Tezzeret's kind of on the flip side to me, where he's obviously an artifact-only kind of situation, but he doesn't, for what you have to pay into him, doesn't really reward the artifact-heavy player that much. Like, it just doesn't feel like you're getting enough for it.
I think... Okay, so we'll keep it all in the same vein. Yes, Tezzeret is similar to the things like Solarian Academy. Tezzeret, thankfully, can be his own engine. Yes, I mean, already in the chat, we've commented on, artifact strategies, and you're saying, like, if you have the signets in your cube, this card gets a lot better. Completely agree. We have 90 artifacts. He can go search up. Like, getting killed by a Mox, I've, watched that happen in Vintage a few times. It can be kind of humorous.
I mean, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I'm just saying, it's a lot of hoops that you're jumping through, for this effect. And especially, talk about getting blown out by shatter effects. You try and, there's a lot of those in Cube already, so trying to, alpha them with your Mind Stones and stuff, and then getting them smash to smithereens and stuff.
I have never in Cube or Vintage seen someone killed by a Lotus, but I've definitely personally killed someone with Mox Ruby.
Yeah.
It was Ruby, I remember, was the one I had as a 5/5. Here, ultimately about Tezzeret, I don't think it's about the narrowness of artifacts necessarily. I don't think it's about, he's either an instant win or an instant do nothing. I do think there are a lot of scenarios where you can't tutor up anything else in your deck. And
right. You just kind of...
he can be very good, but you have to kind of skew more towards it that way. And that's just not for us. It's just, he's a 5-mana Planeswalker. He's more narrow, and I'd prefer the next card on our list. I'd prefer Tezzeret Agent of Bolas over at Tezzeret the Seeker. And as where Tezzeret the Seeker had a very short lifespan in Cube for us, Tezzeret Agent of Bolas had a much longer lifespan, and he left right around the same time the Signets did for similar reasons.
Yeah, I like Tezzeret Agent of Bolas more. I mean, A, he's a mana cheaper. B, being able to turn your mana rocks into permanent guys is a lot better for not only a win condition, but also setting up the wall kind of thing. I don't know, his ultimate is going to come up very rarely in a cube environment, but a lot of times, turning a couple Moxes into 5/5 so that you can block and protect him and then, punch through some damage is going to be okay.
I definitely think he's more versatile in the fact that he can do things you don't necessarily think about. Like, let's say you have a problem with the Sword of Feast and Famine on your opponent's side of the table. Make it a creature!
Yeah,
now you have to deal with that, but still, maybe the sword was the problem.
You make one of their artifacts into a guy and then you damnation.
Yeah, no, that is a thing. That is very good.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's certainly, I think, the better of the two options. He has the problem of being gold, which is always tough. There's just, unless you play like a ton of gold cards, there's just not a lot of room for him.
It's not about gold cards to me, it's about artifacts. And
yeah, but it's about both.
Like when we rotisserie drafted, I think I took this guy in one of the rotisserie drafts, and he still didn't even make my deck, even though I was like trying to make this thing happen. And that was kind of like his like ultimate kind of
Swan song.
Like, yeah, that was the point where I was like,
when you can literally draft any cards you want out of the entire cube and don't end up playing him.
And the other thing is, if you're gonna have a very kind of seemingly narrow draft around me strategy, you want it to have more initial impact than, well, now I'm going to impulse for an artifact. Now I might make a 5/5. Now I'm going to impulse again. Oh, I missed? Okay, I'm going to impulse again. You know, if you had artifact lands in your cube, like this guy works better than Tezzeret the Seeker, or just more artifacts in general. I think that will really help this guy out. He's a powerful card, and there are people out there that will definitely play him, and I think will be good for them. It just, I think in a more standard cube environment, this is not where I'm going to be.
Next up, that is the ugliest picture.
It's not that bad.
They somehow made this card uglier. Stinkweed Imp. I love this guy.
Now, talk about a card that I wasn't sure about for a really long time. I thought too much work when I first looked at this card.
This is definitely one that I think that at first glance, if you've never played with it, it's, what the hell is this Ravnica Common doing in my cube? Like, get this 3-mana 1/2 out of my face. But, like, as you draft it and play with it, it serves a really great functionality in especially the Reanimator deck. A lot of times, you know, if you're playing Reanimator, you know, sometimes you live the dream and you have turn 1 Entomb, turn 2 Exhume, or whatever, you know, you just go crazy.
I believe that is the dream, yes.
Sometimes, though, you have a hand that you're going to keep with, has the reanimation spells but maybe no guys, or it's got search but no guys, or whatever. Stinkweed Imp lets you play defense, and then if they ever kill it, you dredge and attempt to hit your fatties that way. And then you just keep defending in that fashion.
Heaven forbid on burial rights.
Oh, I mean, certainly. Or increasing confusion.
Sure,
you're
just gross at that point. Why talk?
Chainer's Edict, you know.
What kind of sold me on Stinkweed Imp is that it is kind of the ultimate blocker, which goes back to what it was originally used for in Ravnica Limited. I loved that it kills... I mean, if this had been, like, Windrake, it would not be good. It would not be in queue. But since you're probably going for a little bit more of a combo aspect, especially now that we've added Oversold Cemetery and Oath of Ghouls, this card can bring you back in a game when you cast it. It can just turn your library into your graveyard to just start doing gross things,
which is
if it's
just
not
really
in play.
Powerful. I mean, it also slots in... I mean, obviously it's not the most aggressive creature ever.
But it's important to point out that we're talking about Stinkweed Imp, but we're not talking about Golgari Grave Troll because of what it does when it's actually on the battlefield and how that comes up more often.
Right. Golgari Grave Troll, once it's in play, is very meh. It's a very, you know, it's not unique or interesting or different than a million other cards. Whereas Stinkweed Imp, like, you know, it's going to block and it's going to kill whatever it's blocking, and that's usually really good.
Heaven forbid you have a Sword of Fire and Ice in your deck, and all of a sudden you have this evasion creature that just ends the game.
Yeah, game on. But, you know, I think that it's definitely one of those things where it's weird to look at. You know, it's not the prettiest way of solving the issue of getting cards in your graveyard for Reanimator, but he certainly does the job.
No, I mean, it's not the fastest in and of itself. Like, if I see Stinkweed Imp in my opening hand and I'm playing Reanimator, I'm not like, go to aid, discard this guy. But I'm also pretty happy with the way things are going because I'm going to have an excellent roadblock at 3 mana. And I'm going to be able to, like, make what I want to have happen in the game happen.
Like, all of a sudden, you're very much angling for the long game.
Yeah, and even in, like, kind of like black-green value decks, he can just be this incredible, like, roadblock and answer that's recursive that you just didn't have before. And that's really what ended up kind of selling him for me, was that it almost reminded me of playing him in original Ravnica Limited and how good that really was. So he does enough, and I'm for it. I think that it's coming at another angle that's unique. You know, there was talk about Golgari Thug in the chat. I think that guy is, I mean, one less dredge, negligible probably. No evasion, and the fact that he can't kill anything.
Right, no death touch.
Yeah, it's way more of like a stall plan to try to get to that Reanimator.
Meditate.
I've always wanted to play this card in Cube, but I just never have.
I don't see it. Turns are so good.
They can be.
You know the best thing in Magic is taking turns.
Oh, Boston tied the game. That's almost as depressing as your feeling on Red and unassisted.
It's just like every deck is so powerful in Cube. It's going to be so rare that you cast this and get your time lock your opponent literally, and they don't just totally make you pay.
So,
if you want to draw cards in Cube, you could
you've-
certainly do that.
I'm guessing you've never played Meditate in like the environments where Meditate's been good.
I played it in Storm,
Like Blue-Green Storm or like Gilded Lotus Storm?
like Legacy, or not Legacy, Vintage rather. Excuse me. Like the long ago.
Oh. Well, that's definitely not where it's...
Run 4 cards is pretty good.
No, what I'm saying, like, that's not where this card has really been the best. I think... Okay, here's the thing about Meditate. The Tanglewire decks, the Smokestacks decks, the Braids decks, the Prison decks, get a lot out of Meditate.
Sure. You named one good card. I just, having a card that's like, well, it makes Braids way better, like, isn't enough for me. That's just, like, so unexciting. Like, you're gonna play this 4-mana do-nothing spell, wait a turn, untap, and then spend most of your mana the next turn to draw 4 cards?
I like how... yeah. I mean, it's not in our cube, and I don't think it's high enough power level, but I have definitely... like, obviously, if you have a Storm cube, or you have the Storm cards in your cube...
Certainly.
Meditate is very much worth considering. It's, I think, probably... Well, I mean, depending on the mana cost. Depending. It's right up there with, like, Ideas Unbound.
Right. That was the one I was about to say. Is, like... the kind of short-term gain cards are best in combo.
But I think that Meditate is more diverse than that, just in Cube in general. If you don't have as much of that combo base, there are lots of scenarios where you can Meditate and get back in the game. Like, you're just playing against the creature deck, and they don't have pressure on you. You untap and wrath them anyway. Like, it's not the best, but there are all these scenarios where it can be really good. Like, I could see this card seeing play. Is it for us right now in our cube? No. But... I think you're shitting on it a lot more than needs to be shit on.
I just think it's just not good enough for how badly you're going to get blown up by it. Personally.
Eck is the same person who's like, show and tell is absolute garbage because every time you cast it, your opponent puts something better into play.
Time Bolt.
So, we talked about Tezzeret the Seeker. We talked about... we somehow didn't talk about Time Bolt during that time. But, talk about...
Again with the narrow. Very narrow.
That's the thing with Time Bolt. I can't think of people that are so sadistic that they would put this into their cube.
Yeah.
Like,
people just hate their friends.
We like playing powerful Magic. We like playing with the most powerful cards in Magic's history. But I've never brought myself to put Time Vault into cube. Even during those times where it's like, okay, let's play Tezzeret the Seeker and see how that works out. Vintage is the home for this card. Vintage is the only place where you can actually play games where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to sit here, cross my arms, and hope you die to your mana crypt and your Bob before...
You slap Flame Fusillade in your cube?
Yeah, that used to be a thing too, right? Yeah. And again, for me, this is a conversation where Cube skirts the line between the most powerful cards in all of Magic and still wanting to actually play Magic, kind of like Humility. Yes, Time Vault is one of the most powerful cards in all of Magic. Agreed. But I don't want to play it in a limited environment where I actually might want to play the game Magic the Gathering.
Right. If I need to sleep, then we can add these cards.
Stasis was actually not mentioned at all, I don't think. I mean, we haven't...
I think we've gone...
We haven't checked the Reddit thread since we've gone live, but I don't think that would have been...
We've gone, I think, far enough in the world of Magic that no one wants to play with or against Stasis.
The difference between...
It's like that which shall not be named kind of thing.
The difference between Time Vault and Stasis is that Time Vault would like sit in like the Vintage binder, but Stasis I actually put in the Cube binder, and I was like, maybe. Maybe. Rising Waters is still sitting there, hoping one day.
Worldly Tutor, another one.
This guy gets crap a lot, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest problem with this card is that like, the effect is certainly good, but the card disadvantage is something that green cannot afford. Like, it's a slow tutor, and it costs you a card. And that is a really big hit to green and creature decks in general. Like, they're already looking for as many ways as possible to recoup card advantage, and now you're just giving it back for the tutoring. Like, you know, Green Sun Zenith really kind of, to me, put this card out to pasture.
Elamri's Call might be better. I felt that the green spell section of R-Cube had room for this card, and it had room for this effect. Its reception has been lukewarm, I feel like. I don't think anyone's, like, slamming Worldly Tutor thinking that's, like, amazing.
I mean, there are certainly decks that will want it, and will play it, but, like, those are not even necessarily, like, really, like, creature attacking based decks. Like, the decks that want it are, like, either some weird combo, or they need a way to tutor for some guy, or...
I mean, I think you can just play green-white creature decks where Worldly Tutor is the poor man's Green Sun Zenith. I think that having access to another copy of Gaddock, another copy of Raphaelos, another copy of Eternal Witness, another copy
I mean,
of...
I'm not arguing that, but at the same time, I just think that it's too slow. And you're giving up a card for it. Like, Green Sun, putting the guy into play, not costing you a card, you know, it's... The gap between those is so huge. And Natural Order is another one, you know. Natural Order normally getting giant fatties, but in a pinch could get something else.
I always wish that the Portal one put it in your hand. I think that's my problem. Sylvan Tutor?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's Worldly Tutor that's just a sorcery.
Right.
Sylvan Tutor.
Yeah.
But it's rare, so A, it's worth more, and whatever. But yeah, that's kind of my feeling. I still like this card. I think that, you know, maybe it's too much of a want. Maybe it's like I want the green decks to kind of have more of this effect, where it's like, you know, they're not going to have the all-out card draw. They're not going to have that kind of card advantage.
You want this effect, but it needs to be better than this. I think.
Such as...
I'm not saying it even exists. I'm just saying, like...
Okay.
If this was search your library for a green creature card, reveal it to all players, and put it in your hand, that would be fine.
Yeah, no, that's
what
I wish Sylvan Tutor was. I wish Sylvan Tutor, since it was a sorcery, you just put it in your hand.
Exactly. Like Kenny just said, being the 5th best green tutor seems really unnecessary.
Yeah, we play with 700 cards. Maybe that's our problem.
Yeah.
I mean, and Kenny's also right. If Magic cards were just worse in general, this card would be a lot better. If good cards didn't exist.
Yeah, right.
So we call that the Mercadian Masks theory.
Yeah, yes. The prophecy theory.
Oh my god, worst set ever.
Rather
play Homelands.
Zernorb. I have come around on this.
Yeah,
one.
Talk about a card that I've been thoroughly surprised at.
This is definitely the sleeper.
I remember cubing with Zernorb like 5 years ago when we would just jam Necro in, thinking that like Necro is one of the best cards in all of Magic. It must be good in cube. It was not at that time. Let's not say things we can't take about Homelands. I have fond memories of Homelands.
More fond memories than in Prophecy.
Yeah, Prophecy is just like, oh my god.
Yeah. Zernorb...
I might actually hate Prophecy.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So Zernorb is sweet. Kenny just mentioned in chat, liking it a lot better than Ivory Tower.
Yeah, and it's funny, like I think I mentioned this on a show in the past, that when we made that inclusion, I thought Ivory Tower would like win out against Zernorb, and I can remember cubing in the last 3 years playing mode Ivory Tower decks and having that win games and not feeling good about it, but it was a thing.
Zernorb is just sweet, like, you know, you're going to gain some life with it, and that's cool. Sometimes, however, you're going to do really cool stuff with it, like sacrifice all your lands and balance.
Yeah.
Or, you know...
The scenarios in which it's gross are not that hard to think
Night
of.
of the Reliquary combo.
Huh?
They don't block, and you're like, oh yeah?
Oh.
Take $1 million. Kaboom!
Yes. Combo.
Yeah.
Onboard tricks.
Killing them with onboard tricks. Combo.
Yeah, Orb has been really good at like defining races in race situations where it was completely not used in its constructed heyday. Well, not completely. Casual play that would definitely found its way into what used to be old Magic articles, but again, that's another rabbit hole conversation. Orb, we think of Orb, we think of Balance, we think of Necro, but it's great at races. I mean, I mentioned on shows previously, like I had to Zealous Conscripts that card and sack all my lands to get back in a race.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely restricted.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that it was restricted during a time when pretty much like every artifact was considered to be like...
Juggernaut was banned.
Yeah, artifacts back in like the 94 Wild West era of Magic were too good. Like every tournament deck played probably like one Fountain of Youth if it wasn't like the Urnam de Jin deck.
Yeah.
It's like free. Like why wouldn't
free,
you play?
Why wouldn't
it's
you?
free. Come on. It's gonna be relevant.
Next up, another artifact. There we go. Memory Jar.
Now, Memory Jar is a big point of contest.
Speaking of combo-rific kind of cards,
it can be.
This is the kind of thing that like Mind's Desire wants.
Oh, definitely. You want to Desire into it. You want to play the turn before you Desire. You want to use it to find your rituals. Maybe ritual it into it as part of the ritual chain, etc., etc. The real question is, if you aren't playing the combo of Cube, is Jar going to do anything?
I think it does. It's funny. I think that without a combo-centric home for it, so like if you don't have Storm, especially, Jar is going to do less than what a lot of people initially assume, but more than enough to qualify its inclusion. And that's kind of a weird way to put that.
No.
But like, it's never going to be like this insane blowout play. But a lot of times, like, you're going to lay it, and then your opponent's going to, like, not kill it, and you're going to untap, and then, dump as many cards. It's effectively like, you get to draw 3 or 4 cards and play them all, and your opponent gets milled for 7. Like, very rarely do they have anything they can do, especially if they tap their mana down. And that milling 7 is surprisingly relevant. I've seen a number of games that go long between, like, 2 blue decks, where Memjar Crack, will mill out the opponent who has drawn more cards as a way to catch them off guard like that.
Long story short, it functions in surprisingly more ways than we would have thought.
Yeah.
And you're talking about how players are going to like tap out on their turn, and then you're effectively milling them for 7, so it can kind of function like a time walk. Then you also get the players that it's like, well, they were going to leave their mana untapped. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh no, now
they're going to gamble.
He's going to jar.
Yeah.
And I'm going to draw 7. Hit all your great instants, hopefully.
Yeah.
Now it affects the way they play the game. I mean, yes, and it's all of its initial uses, it was just going to do broken stuff all the time. And now in Cube, it functions very differently when we don't have Storm. But I think that, surprisingly enough, here we are a decade later, the casting cost actually works out really well for Cube, because turn 6 is so huge in
turn
Magic
6 is
these
the turn.
days. You're laying your Titans, you're laying your big planeswalkers with other spell backups to protect them. You're doing all this stuff, and Jar really gets that done. And I've gone back and forth on Jar a lot over the years, and I know that I felt like it was out for 6 or 9 months in the last year and a half or so. We've brought it back, and I think it's been an excellent role player. I mean, yeah, those green ramp decks now have a way to kind of like Time Walker refill in a one-shot, use all that mana they generated to cast a bunch of spells while your opponent doesn't do anything. I think the scenarios are there, and the play with the card is really kind of the key. There's a lot of space for players to play with it and have it do stuff other than just like am I the Mind's Desire Dream Halls player? Like, yeah, I'm going to take this Jar and play it in my Storm deck. Mm-hmm. We've been able to make it do a lot more cool stuff, and we don't even have like Welder. We just like play it semi-fairly.
That'd be sweet.
Oh my god. Have you never had to play Magic where there's been like the jar inside the jar hand?
I didn't play in that season.
Oh my god, it was brutal. I mean, that was like literal extended.
Yeah.
Ugh. Talk about milling somebody out. Milling them out from like 30 with jar after jar after jar.
Cruel Ultimatum. So this one I actually like. It doesn't see a ton of play.
Well, it's pretty obvious why.
That is a mana cost.
Yeah. It doesn't get any richer or more full flavor than Cruel Tomato.
This is the greedy one. However, man, is this ever a blowout every time it resolves.
And that's really kind of why it's still there. I mean, we talked...
Also, this is possibly one of the most satisfying cards to Force Spike ever in Cube, because it's like so much work to cast it.
I'll give you that. You don't have like a loose green mana off of like a bounce land or something when you're trying to cast a spell.
You have to filter all of that through other things.
The thing about Cruel Ultimatum, and you've kind of hit it on both sides, it's just so hard to cast that it gets shipped around the table, and the guy playing Grixis might not even play it anyway because he's playing like red with like just playing like a Fire Ice and a DT or something. It doesn't really happen, but it's so satisfying when it does.
It's absolutely great.
It's like reverse humility. As where humility is just miserable to play with, casting Cruel Ultimatum, few things feel better in Magic.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't stop. You just like read it word by word, and you're like, okay, sack a guy. Yes. Discard cards. Yes. Lose life. Okay, it's Wicked Edition. Yes. Wait, now I get to do all this other stuff? Oh, get
it's
out
a lot
of
like
town!
Aurelia's Fury in that regard, where like
it's so much better.
It just keeps going.
So
and
much
going
better
and
than
going.
Aurelia's Fury.
But I mean, like in terms of the text, like they just keep adding more and more and more onto it. But wait, there's more.
Yeah, I mean, Cruel Ultimatum doing 2/3 of the things it does for like 10% reduction on mana cost would just be spectacular.
It should just be like Cryptic Command, where instead of like it should be like choose 4 of these things. It is.
And you're like you're slowly toying with your opponent. You're like,
this one?
No, you gotta keep that guy because you're gonna discard 3 and I'm gonna draw 3. So
okay,
let's do that.
Life? Do I gain life?
I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where, at the very least,
it's maybe it's a bonus for the 5-color player, although that's still even kind of steep for the 5-color player.
It's certainly tempting for a lot of players. Like they'll especially if they're in like blue and black or blue and red or black and red if they're a control deck, and then they see this like, oh.
It's weird. Like we've talked about trap cards, and we will talk about trap cards again in the future. I don't think Cruel is a trap because I don't. It's like how can you walk into this giant pit you see coming?
Right.
Like, you can't accidentally fall into Cruel Ultimatum deck and be like, oh man, I have to play this thing.
Yeah.
It's just
if your 23rd playable is Cruel Ultimatum, you've gone sideways in a lot of ways that are not Cruel Ultimatum's fault.
It just reminds me of the Winston draft we did recently where I played this card 17 basic lands.
It happens.
Might have casually won that, Winston.
Stormbind. I like this one.
I like this card a lot. This is a card that I am surprised that more people don't run.
I think that people don't like discarding cards, especially at random. But it gives an important. It's important to give decks like this some reach. When the ground gets stalled up, when your creatures get blown up, whatever, you can no longer get through. Sometimes you just throw 3 lands at your control opponent and they die.
As where Stormbind was very good back in the day, 'tis it still good in Cube today, and I think it's surprisingly overlooked, and I'm not really sure why. I mean, maybe this new giant Bahugamos, or whatever that people call it.
Boribgamos or whatever.
Yeah, like, maybe that'll help kind of bring this guy back into the fold, Stormbind back into the fold, that people will realize what a great card this is for Cube. But red aggressive decks, green aggressive decks, heaven forbid actual red-green aggressive decks, want to get those last 6-8 points of damage. Like, it happens so quickly with Stormbind.
It functions a lot like Seismic Assault in the aggressive decks, where, like, okay, I need a way to finish the game when I can no longer get through with my guys. Now I have this enchantment where I can just, these cards I'm not going to use. Nothing in my deck costs more than 4. I've got all these lands that I drew. Hiya! Like,
it's not even about like a card quality evaluation to mid to late to the game. It's that you're playing red and green aggressive cards, so you've probably dealt 8, 10, 12 damage to an opponent before they've stabilized, and now you just have this inevitability enchantment. It doesn't matter if you have no cards in your hand,
right?
But you usually have 1, 2, or 3
I drew
when
a blank?
This lands.
Shock you.
Yeah, like, oh, this Thrun can't get through anymore. Yeah.
So
Fear Vortex you. If that helps kind of convey the message we're getting at.
And last on our list, Vesuva.
Now, this was a card that's been in Cube for a very, very long time. And, we all I feel like we all kind of agree that clones are good. And that...
How about a land clone?
Well, we're talking about the format with the best cards ever. We only have one of them. Why wouldn't we want twice as many?
It's very slow.
And that's kind of the thing that we've realized. Maybe this is more of an R-Cube thing and something just to think about. The aggro decks were at a bit of a fault because there's so many tap lands. Like, you'd think, like, oh, the control decks have to play them, and thusly they're going to be worse. But it was more like that's just more of a concentration of lands. And we want lands to come into play untapped more often so that aggressive decks can always do what they want to do. And Vesuva was more often than not trying to make a vivid land, trying to make a bounce land.
So many times I saw Vesuva copying your planes.
Island, mostly.
But I mean, like, you know...
I want to cast Cryptic Command, I want to activate
when Vesuva is a basic land that comes into play tapped, you know, that's pretty sad.
It might be poor deck building, who knows?
I just, you know, it's
I don't fault anyone for running this card, just for the record.
I don't think so either. I just think, like, it's a slow and very unexciting card that doesn't really lead to any kind of, like, interesting anything.
We can talk about Caracas. We've got time to talk about Caracas.
Yeah, we can talk about this. Caracas. For those who don't know what it does.
Now, I feel like I've gone out of my way to make Caracas more playable than it had been in years past. I think that when I incepted the cube that we used, it was there, and it was there for years, and then that kind of, like, that conversation came about where it was like, it's just planes. If you're a white mage and there's nothing else, you'll take planes, but you don't really have an active reason to take it.
There is a deceivingly large amount of legends in cube.
Yeah.
And it comes up...
We did cover it in the lands episode, and I don't want to spend for days on this, but yes, Caracas...
The fact that it works both sides, like you can use it to just bounce their random legends...
Stop the reanimator decks a lot of time, give you advantage with your own guys.
Nice Gristlebrand. Whoop! Like, so...
I've been the guy who's been able to, like, hardcast Gristlebrand in a match and have it Caracas.
That's a shame.
Now let's check that Reddit thread just in case there was anything that got updated there.
See if there are any new ones.
Yeah, while we've been...
Ooh. Okay, we got a couple...
Oh, Life from the Loam.
Okay, I'll bring this back up now. Ooh, alright. Life from the Loam.
Definitely worth mentioning, and definitely interacts with cards we've mentioned on this cast. You know, obviously it's increasing value in our own cube with the Mirage fetch lands, but also look at Stormbind for existence. For example, now you're that red-green mage, maybe you had the Wasteland, maybe you had a Treetop Village, maybe you're playing Life from Loam and value there, but you also have the Stormbind, so now all of a sudden you can just, like, Ancestral for 6 damage out of your graveyard with Life from the Loam, and we're not obviously talking about the best-case scenario, which is more the Seismic Assault, Swans, Life from the Loam engine you got going on there. That's all really powerful, really good stuff. So, if you don't have the tools for it, though, I completely understand not playing Life from the Loam. I just really like it. I'm always trying to find new ways to make it better, and it does still have that dredge thing, which can, you know, it can do stuff. Thoughts on Life from Loam at all, Eck, or do you think
I'm sorry, I was reading this thread. I like Life from Loam just because, like, you know, getting random value with it with fetch lands is good enough in certain decks, and if you ever get any kind of way to, like, really go deep with it, it just gets better.
Yeah, I'll often play it in 5-color decks where I've got, like, 3 fetch lands.
It's also a great sideboard card.
Oh, yeah, against the LD deck. Gotta keep it fair.
What else?
There's definitely some other good ones on there. Final Fortune, I think, is worth talking about. I felt like... What did this card remind me of?
Ugh. There we go.
Final Fortune. When I first saw it on that list, it definitely made me think of something similar to it. I mean, I remember the circumstance where I was an aggro red player and I boarded in Pact of Negation against an opponent and won a game that way. Mm-hmm. Maybe Final Fortune's similar to that. I don't know. I want to think that there was something else that really clicked with me when I saw this card.
What I look at Final Fortune as is, like, we have... If you are a deck that is playing Final Fortune and actively wants it, I think you are making a concession that whatever you have drafted is considerably below par, and your only chance to win a match is to time walk your opponent and get them that way.
Maybe Final Fortune is better considered to be like Flame Rift. Well, you're like, you're going to attack again.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to, like...
I know.
You're effectively getting another combat step for 2 mana, another draw step for 2 mana, but these will be your last things. Like, you have to... You're going to cast it when you're in a position where you know this is going to get the job done.
Yeah.
And maybe Relentless Assault is just better because there's no downside to it. I mean, your downside is it costs twice as much mana. I don't know.
Mana Tithe. This is one that kind of been in and out and up and down.
This is like, and I want to, but I just don't pull the trigger on it kind of card. Lapse of Certainty has actually been in and out of the cube more frequently than Mana Tithe has. And I think that
the more aggressive your white section of cube is, the better this card becomes.
Probably.
If you don't really have support for like a really, really aggressive white deck, this is not going to see a ton of play. It's not going to be great. That said, it's going to catch a lot of people off guard because even if it's in your cube, people will often play... people will respect a single open blue mana, but they will not respect single open white. Because like, oh, maybe a Swords to Plowshares or something.
But at the same time, Mana Tithe is one of those cards where the threat of it existing is almost better than it being in your cube. Like, if people just, like, they don't know if Mana Tithe is in your cube and forces them to play differently, and if you're the white mage, you can take advantage of that, that's a big deal. That's kind of like where Lapse of Certainty kind of, like, fell in the cube, because it was like, ooh, there's always this white memory lapse out there. Like, this could be the circumstance. Like, I'm going to play differently because of it. But it had more reach than Mana Tithe did. So I still really like Mana Tithe. The thing about like Force Spikes, the blue ones, is that blue has card draw, blue has card selection, blue has looters and thirsts and things like that. So
once Force Spike becomes bad, you can get rid of it.
Hopefully. Unlike Mana Tithe, where in the white decks it's like you can't really even like discard it to Patrol Hound to give your guy first strike or something.
That being said, it is both a combo and a non-bow with like Thalia. And cards of that variety.
Yeah.
Like, making it cost more sucks, but, like, them, like, tying more of their mana up increases the odds that it will kick on.
Man, I love the Gatherer text here. There are 2 rulings for Mana Tithe and Gatherer. 1, payment is optional.
This is the time-shifted version of Force Spike from 2007. Weird. Okay.
Yeah, there's a comment on there from 2007 reminding people that this is the time-shifted version of Force Spike.
Okay. That's a strange one.
Gatherer, ladies and gentlemen. Don't miss it.
So,
what else? There's got to be something else over there.
Huh?
We still got time. We got 20 minutes.
I want to talk about the Moto Cube.
Oh, okay. It's your party, Eck.
I feel like people want to...
Talk away.
All right. So, Moto Cube's coming back online. It's up now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the list. I know I've seen a lot of people kind of talking in different places about, well, what's good, what's bad, this cube sucks, I love this cube, kind of different positions on it from top to bottom. And I wanted to kind of briefly touch on some of the additions and subtractions, as well as, cards and archetypes to look out for, cards and archetypes to avoid, things like that, so that you're not going completely blind.
And when Eck is done, we will come back to, there's 2 more cards in the chat we can talk about. But
Sure.
Go on. MTGO Cube.
So, the first place I looked is this change list. So
that was a daily MTG article by Trick, like this week, I think.
About the change list.
Yeah. It was just clearly like here's an ins and outs. It's not like related to one another, but it was a nice compact list. When we did the show on the MTGO Cube changes, we were referencing a Gathering Magic page, which has kind of like fallen into the archives.
Yeah.
But there's something this week since Cube is coming back to MTGO that you can hopefully easily reference to see exactly is it there, is it not there, kind of thing.
So the biggest thing in terms of especially like the Moto Cube, because the way they change it is so massive. I mean, these are all changes, right? There's no way you can memorize like all of the new cards versus all the old cards and what came out and what didn't come out. But a lot of the changes are very similar cards coming in for them. For example, like Black Knight came out and Hand of Cruelty, wherever he is, came in. So, like, that's not a big deal that you don't recognize that. Things to notice are tricks that are coming in or tricks that are going out, because that's going to be the most common thing. So, for example, like, Agony Warp's no longer in, so you no longer have to think about Agony Warp as being a potential out. Sad Bituminous Blast is going. There are also some cards that kind of really made decks work a lot better that are now out. The big one is Dream Halls. So, if you want to draft like the Storm deck, Dream Halls is out, so you have to be aware of that. They added a lot of mana fixing. Mana fixing is a hugely much bigger part of this cube than it used to be. They added a ton of lands. They also added back in Emrakul. They took a lot of the big fatties out, but Emrakul's back in. That's one of the decks I want to talk about. But yeah, the filter lands are in. There's the tri lands are in. There's all these new mana fixings. So I would expect to see a lot of 2-color decks with a heavy splash, or even just pure 3-color decks, or even kind of above that. In terms of archetypes and stuff like that, one of the cards I noticed immediately that they added and is in now is Academy Rector. This card in this list is a trap because there is nothing to get with it. There is no Form of the Dragon. There's not even a bargain. There's like Necropotence and Future Sight, and those are, I think, the two best things you can get. I guess Opposition maybe. So, there's really not a great Academy Rector deck. So if you see this, it is not what I would consider a card that I would take. In general, the aggressive slant in this cube is pretty minimal, especially if you look at like the red early plays. A lot of them are pretty embarrassing. Like Goblin Patrol is pretty bad. Goblin Cadets is pretty bad. Frenzy Goblin was just an arcade, but we're now cutting it. It's been very unexciting. Chandra's Phoenix is unexciting. They're using a spot for Welder. Hell's Thunder, Hellspark Elemental. They have a lot of kind of unimpressive to uninteresting cards for aggressive decks, especially in red. There are still some of the bad sideboard cards, or someone's talking in chat about taking out a lot of them. There are still some. There are color hoses to some degree in this cube, but it's not nearly as big of a deal. One deck that is in full force in this cube is Eureka Show and Tell. Show and Tell is in. Channel is also in, as well as Eureka.
They definitely seem more like outliers in terms of power level. I'm not really sure.
Right. So, like, Eureka, Show and Tell, Channel, straight up into... There's no Blightsteel Colossus. There's no Darksteel Colossus. There's a Sunring Titan, but that's about as big as it goes. I guess Mirror Battlesphere, if you want to consider that bigger. There is, however, all 3 Eldrazi's, Karn Liberated, All Is Dust. The Channel Eureka deck seems like it's going to be very good. There's some tutoring for it. I'm pretty sure Mystical Tutor is in.
I hope so.
Yes. So Mystical Tutor is in. Vamp Tutor is obviously in.
We did do an episode about this very recently, I feel like.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's more relevant now. Because people actually...
reference the Magic Box episode 9, I believe. We have a GP winner on it where we talk about these changes. They only get kind of high during it, so they're mostly useful during that entire show.
Another thing to be aware of is, so the Storm deck, what they really did with the Storm deck in this iteration is, it feels like they broke up a lot of the Storm cards into different colors. So what I mean by that is, like, you have Mind's Desire, and, Brain Freeze, and, things like Turnabout and Time Spiral. But you don't have, like, Ideas Unbound is out. There's no Meditation. There's no cheap, real big card drawing spell. There is Frantic Search. But then, if you go to Red, Red's got Priest of Orobrask, which is a weird one.
Yeah, that guy's always been in there. I don't think I've ever seen it.
Like, so Red has
to do anything.
Yeah, Red has the Seething Song, but not really anything else. Black has Dark Ritual, but doesn't have Cabal Ritual, or other acceleration past that. And then, like, in Green has Heartbeat, and as well as Nostalgic Dreams, which are both excellent in the cube deck, or in the My Desire deck rather. But it's going to be very difficult to kind of build a cohesive deck that uses all of these different cards because they're all spread out over all the colors. So I think that, especially with Dream Halls being gone, I would be very wary of drafting the Storm deck, just because it seems like you have to go through a lot of hoops to get all the pieces, and you're just going to randomly lose to your mana a lot of times. I would definitely Like, the Eureka Channel deck seems very good. Being mid-range seems very good in this cube. I would take lands pretty highly. Mana fixing is a big deal in this cube. There are just a million billion lands. They added a bunch of gold cards too. Yeah, so I would look at being either a control deck or a mid-range deck or the Channel Eureka deck. I don't know if I would really want to commit to being an aggressive red deck. I mean, you can certainly do that, but it's just not going to come together as often.
The cards are still there.
They're still there, but they're not... A lot of the good
What did
ones
they
are.
cut from aggro red? What did they cut from aggro red?
What did they cut from aggro red? Let's see. This giant alphabetical list. Active aggression.
I mean, Ankh of Mishra. The card's very good, but
Blood Knight.
nah, it's not a problem. They put in Ash Zealot.
Yeah. Devastating Dreams.
Nope. Not a card in that deck.
Goblin.
Nope, not a card in that deck.
Hellion Crucible.
They cut Ram Gang, I guess.
Yeah, they cut Ring Game.
Whatever. There's still plenty of aggro red cards. I mean, the thing about the MTGO cube is you have to remember that it's 95% creature interaction based, which makes these whole like Channel Emrakul outliers, Eureka outliers seem really weird. Like, I don't know why they put them in there when they're like base non-powered cube is so oriented towards card creature interaction, which makes like combat tricks better, which makes just tricks in general better. Like, I've always liked like the green-white Venser deck. Of course, they cut Venser too. Those people. But that's just like the really most important thing to remember. I mean, it's a very different takeoff from when we draft like our powered cube, and there are control decks. There are combo decks in a sense. I think with the MTGO cube, that stuff's really been stripped away. You don't have a storm deck anymore. I mean, there's faint pieces of it existing, but it's not a real thing. Depending on how long this thing is up, maybe next week we'll just go over the archetypes that we feel are there and the ones that aren't there. That could be a thing, because I think there are definitely some trap corners in the MTGO cube list that you might not really think about if you don't break down the changes. I could definitely see going into a draft. I mean, granted, in the non-powered version, I would never look at Dream Halls and be like, yeah, it's happening. But there are definitely people out there that do it, and I would,
First of all, Holiday is a big Dream Halls fan. I know he was.
We talked about it when he was on the show about, it's like they cut Canonist. Yeah, I'm going to go for it. It's like, well, they also cut all the tools that you would need to be able to make that thing happen. So, enjoy MTGO cubing. There should be a lot of it on this channel soon. I will come in as much as I can on that front. We had 2 more cards from the chat we wanted to touch on before we leave you today as far as how we feel about them question-wise. The first was... Hedetsuku's Second Right.
How the hell do you spell that thing?
Chad has lost it.
There we go.
It's the red and 2. I don't even remember if this is a sorcery or an instant because it's been so long since I've played with it. It is an instant. Okay, better. Talk about a card that's... I think Humility was a great example today about things that are just unfun and may do absolutely nothing. Sure, if you're playing a cube environment where someone has Hedetsu's Second Right, be aware of it. I mean, that guy usually has a big tag on his forehead, and everyone at the draft knows exactly who that person is, and you're going to play slightly differently when you play against that one opponent.
This card got a lot less... I mean, I don't know how interesting this card ever was, but it got a lot less interesting when Mana Burn no longer was a thing.
Are you sure it didn't get more interesting? You can't, burn from 11 to 9 to, from 10 to 9, whatever?
Well, the fact you can't do that means, it's that much less, you have so much less control over it as the guy getting hit with it. You have so little recourse.
So it's it gets better.
The card is better, yes.
Yeah. That seems this sounds like an argument for Second Right.
Right.
Personally, I'm not into this card. Again, talk about the most narrow of all narrow town. It's not interactive. It's just this, do you have it? Do you have it? It's like if they printed a spell that was if during your end step you have 29 life and 2 creatures on the battlefield, win the game!
I mean, also, how disappointing is it to draw this thing after, you get your opponent's turn, you're like, oh, I've got right, I'm going to sit. And then finally, you're like, all right, screw it, I'm not going to draw it. Attack you to 7. And you draw it.
I mean, I remember playing against it in Standard, where your opponent was just start to kind of attack kind of weird.
Yeah.
I'll just send just this guy. And you're like...
I played against it in Kamigawa Block, And
we all did.
I definitely cast Shining Shoal pitching Myojin of Infinite Rage, or the white one. The one that costs 8 and send it all back to my opponent.
You mean 8 of 10 of it?
Enough of it.
Meh. I mean, I just really don't like the card. Like, I understand why people like get gimmicky and get behind it. Like, that's awesome! Out of nowhere! But it's not a thing I like. Then we have Vernal Bloom, which is like kind of another version of Mana Flare, Heartbeat of Spraying, that kind of thing.
This is one-sided.
Whenever a forest is tapped for mana, even if it's a Temple Garden, it's still going to produce an extra green. So not quite as powerful, but hey, if you're the green mage, it's probably going to do a whole lot for you. Conversely, if you're anybody else, it might not do anything for you, which is one of the problems that we have with cards like Mana Flare. This card's totally okay.
It's okay. It costs 4 and doesn't affect the board, which is kind of a death knell.
In the most recent cube update we did for Dragon's Maze, I might have been able to be talked into this card. Alternatively, we went with Awakening Zone, just because it felt like it came at things from more than this one angle. It's not that big of a deal if it costs 3 or 4 on the Mana Flare, and yes, you want to do things just for you, but unlike Mana Flare and those related cards, you can't necessarily, Palinchron go infinite. I mean, you can. It's a little bit harder. It's just not like that instant, I have something cool happening. You have to work for it a little bit more. It's kind of like a poor man's Raphaelos or something. And I feel like we're getting a lot more diversity out of Awakening Zone with this most recent update.
Yeah. I don't think... Can you go infinite with this? No.
You can make infinite green mana with Palinchron pretty easily.
It takes too much blue.
What are you talking about?
With Vernal Bloom?
Oh, no.
Even if you have the Trop and the Breeding Pool?
It's rough. Like I said, you could do it. It's just...
Chromatic Lantern. There we go.
Sure. I think that does it. Technically, you've never updated that page, so who knows. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in this week. We'll come back with maybe more about MTGO Cube next week. Who knows what the topic will be. You can contact us at draftcube@gmail.com to make your submissions. You can also find us every week on Twitter to drop any kind of line about anything you're interested on. At Tristan Gregson right here, at YoungMecha for Eck. Check out the blogspot, eckamon.blogspot.com. Not only do we have the cube list with the proposed changelog up there, but we also have the Skeleton Cube list, which is very good for new players. We have the cube on tappedout.net, so you can waste hours of your life, like I already have, just kind of running through mock drafts.
Which is weird, because you can just literally pick the cube up and do that.
It's so much more work. You subscribe on YouTube, add us on Twitch, find a place that you like interacting with us, and please do so. We're still very spread out across all the interwebs, so there's not really a great place, but as long as you're doing it, we get the message. And last but not least, no shuffling yet. There's a donate button up at the bottom of the screen. We would like additional funds to be able to bring you additional content, do additional things. And Twitch has been really great for us with getting additional views. We just want to convert that into additional content. So please donate. Anything you can contribute will be very helpful, and we'll try to not butcher your name on the show. So there you have it. Anything else?
I am going to be streaming MTGO Cube as much as I can this week. I do have work.
You should create a calendar and put it on your blog.
I'm thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
If only
then I'll know when to tune in or show up.
Once I figure out exactly when I'm going to be available. I think my plan is tonight to do one after we're done IRL cubing. So probably around 10:30 or 5 hours from now, depending on where you are. And then Cube will probably be in